So we decided this week that what we're going to kind of talk about is the follow-up on Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the deportations and what's going on with that, and the 14th Amendment, and what are some of the misconceptions and what are the actual facts on that. We decided on last Friday we were going to research this, Bones, and man, over the weekend, LA has blown up, man. What are you seeing there?
Well, first off, I'll say this because starting out with what we were going to start out with is Kilmar Abrego Garcia has been brought back to the U.S. and is standing facing court dates with charges, just like we had talked about.
Right,
So he's here, he's back in the U.S., and that's what's going on. Then L.A. blew up while I was doing that research.
right.
Uh, And then I guess over the weekend, other sanctuary cities are having the same issue, but not on the same scale.
Right.
I believe what I think, is there's some financing behind the program, and I believe that they said that it's being investigated as far as where the financing coming from.
That's my understanding as well. As a matter of fact, I saw a photograph of a bunch of bionic shields that are being issued to the protesters, along with the rumor that they were planning on attacking 500 deployed Marines. Boy, I'd like to have a ringside seat for that one.
That would be a sight to see. Um, because the Marines are partially peaceful also.
Well,
That's that's been that's been the whole thing with them. This is a partially peaceful demonstration, right?
well, and you
That's,
listen to Governor Newsom, and I can't remember the other lady, the governor from down there, or mayor of Los Angeles, saying, "Oh, these protests are peaceful. There's nothing going on here. All these pictures are propaganda and false news."
yeah, that's bullshit. That's
And
bullshit.
yeah, and yet now you've got Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, telling Governor Newsom that he is on the verge of facing criminal charges for obstruction.
We can only hope, as far as that goes. Um, you know, having the military, National Guard, and the U.S. Marines deployed to L.A. to protect federal property and people.
Right.
That's it's a good call from Trump, as far as I'm concerned. Number one, you're on U.S. soil doing what you're doing, waving a Mexican flag, and part of the verbatim coming out of the protesters, the violent protesters, is California belongs to Mexico, and you need to
Mm-hmm.
leave our people alone. Well, that's not true at all. California
Yeah,
doesn't
California is
belong
part of the
to
United
Mexico.
States. Yeah, the waving of Mexican flags, the burning of American flags. I'm seeing a ton of things flashing up talking about that, saying, you're in a country that gives you the right to do this, waving a flag from a country that you couldn't stand to live in, and burning our flag. It's created, man, has it created a firestorm on social media. Some people that I have always considered very mellow, thoughtful, have come out with some posts basically saying, you know what, friend me, unfriend me, I'm going to piss some people off, I don't care.
I,
And then they're coming out about this, and the National Guard being deployed, and then your politicians in California challenging his right to be able to do that, stating, "Oh, that's uncalled for. You can't do it. It's unprecedented." Well, no, it's not unprecedented. It was actually done by the Democrats during the LA riots in '92, I believe it was.
yeah, yeah. George Bush, President Bush, had them deployed to
Right.
L.A. To take care of kind of a similar situation, take care of the violent um, actions from the protesters. protecting people and property.
Right.
So it's happened before that too. I mean,
Oh yeah,
it depends on.
this isn't the first time. They're just upset because they can't take care of it. And there was one sheriff, I guess in Florida, that basically
Yep.
stood up and said, I will not assist ICE in arresting people. And he is on the verge of being suspended and told that that's part of his duty is to uphold the
Yeah.
Constitution.
Well, you look at it. And, I firmly believe if the administration prior had followed followed all the rules as far as letting people into the country, we wouldn't be here right now.
Oh, I
You know,
agree.
and then you have your sanctuary states that want to protect the criminals that ICE is after, want to protect them. So ICE has to come in and hunt them down, and then they find them in environments with other families living in the same dwelling,
Mm-hmm.
and so they check everybody. You
Right.
know, so
And
so that there's the residual deportations from that. Not necessarily you're a criminal, but you're here illegally.
right.
So if they would have followed suit like they were asked to do and turned over the criminal element,
Mm-hmm.
um, most of that wouldn't be happening at all.
Right. And on the sanctuary cities, first of all, that term is always just not sat right with me. Sanctuary city. And my understanding is sanctuary cities aren't there to protect them. It's just in those cities, they're not supposed to take action. They're not supposed to interfere with ICE, but they're not supposed to assist ICE. Their officers, and I understand that the reasoning behind the concept is our officers have to work in these streets, and we need these people to trust us in order for us to get our job done. Okay, I do understand that. And
But everything is, I guess, to a point, right?
right,
To a certain point.
it was never supposed to go to we are going to protect them. It's we will turn a blind eye to it and allow ICE or federal agencies to do their job. We are not allowed to assist, and thereby creating some type of rapport with that community so they could function within their capacity protecting their citizens. That's what a sanctuary city was
Well,
set up to be.
Well, then again, those people that are non-criminal that are here without going through the proper channels, and there's probably a lot of them
Mm-hmm.
um, in the sanctuary city. I think that's what that was designed to help protect, not necessarily the criminal element
Right.
that's
It was never
involved
designed
in
to
it.
protect the criminal. It was to protect the people who were just here illegally trying to make a living.
Yeah, those are good people, and in my experience, in my past, I have aided and abetted the good people that have came here, uh, probably illegally, but they wanted to get jobs, they wanted to work, they wanted to do this. So I have personally helped them people out and get them on the right track, the right channels to get the proper papers that they need to do what they desire to do.
Right.
So
And that's the thing. I think that's what the 14th Amendment was supposed to be about is giving people that wanted to come and be contributing members of society to come and support the United States to become citizens, to make a living. We want to allow that. We want to bring in these good, hardworking people. And if they've skipped a step or two, let's get them back on track. But the criminal element that is coming in is making that a little tough because how do you separate them? And I think that's the tough part. Then I hear, people talking about, oh yeah, well, U.S. citizens are being deported. Well, kind of like you mentioned, you do a huge sweep like that. You know what? nobody's error free, but the number I saw of actual U.S. citizens that had been deported was like 70 or 80. It's not like we're doing mass deportations, and every one of them are being assisted in getting back into the country.
right? That and follow the proper channels. Come through the front door.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's knock on the door, do what we need to do, and then welcome, welcome, welcome.
Right.
So,
And And so on the deportations, I mean, the sanctuary city thing's getting to be a big problem, and I've seen where they've moved to get rid of that term and take away that function and say there cannot be a sanctuary city. Uh,
yeah, there's
the,
motions
yeah,
for
the
that.
motions have been started, and I can understand it from that side because of what it's become. I think had it been used for its original intention, it might not have been such a big issue. But it's been corrupted to the point that you've got judges being arrested for hiding illegals in their courtrooms, which if they're in their courtrooms, they're obviously criminals. They're not just there illegally. They are criminals.
Right.
And they're hiding them from ICE in their courtrooms. That's aiding and abetting, and they should be arrested and face charges.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of talk about that too from the far right. Like they're saying they should deport them along with the criminal element.
Yeah, now, see,
But,
I don't see
but
where
you can't.
legally you could do a deportation on a U.S. citizen. As a matter of
No, you
fact,
can't.
it kind of segues us into a little bit more of the conversation on the 14th Amendment because I did some research on that. I did some research on what the legislation and the proposed stuff is that is going in to be reviewed. In fact, it has been reviewed, and we're waiting on a decision from the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
Uh,
I said that. I said that because that's what's out there. Not that I believe it. You
right,
know, but
right.
but yeah.
No, that you're
Um,
right. That is the rhetoric that we're hearing because of the anger being created over these issues. You've got one side out burning and trashing cities, and the other side is going, hey, look, we don't want to be violent, but let's get rid of the people that are creating and causing this. So before I segue into that 14th Amendment thing, uh, that brought up the other point that you had mentioned about the financing for all this, and we talked about the shields. And and I know that they have been looking and stating that these riots are being financed and they're tying them back in. Uh, Nothing concrete right now, but they have tied it back into some of the sources and where the funding is coming from. And to me, those people need to be charged with treason. Uh, treason is a serious offense, and I've used the word before. But these people that are going against and taking action against our government just because they disagree with the way things are being handled, those are treasonous affairs. And I don't think the punishment for treason has ever been changed. And it used to be that you were hung immediately. And I don't
yeah,
know that it's ever
I
really
don't know.
changed. I
Yeah, I
don't
don't
have
know
the fact
that.
on that, but I've never heard that it has been changed.
I
Uh,
don't know what the punishment for it is. I'd have to look it up.
but there should be a very severe, in my opinion, it should still be that. I think with all crime, deportations aside, illegals aside, I have felt for years people keep talking about we need new laws to cover this, new laws to cover that. No, we need to
Enforce the
back up,
laws that.
enforce the laws and punishments that we have now.
Yes.
If we
Yeah.
actually enforce them and held people accountable, uh, we wouldn't have this kind of thing going on.
And that's what is being suggested from the administration is let's enforce the laws that we have. I forget the guy's name that's in charge of ICE now. off the top of my head.
Right.
But that's what he's always said. If they would have enforced the laws in the last administration,
We wouldn't be
we
here.
wouldn't be here.
Yep.
So
Now, jumping into, the laws, we talked the 14th Amendment. Still, the courts have said that the Constitution does apply to people that are on U.S. soil or in U.S. jurisdiction. There's still a large faction of government, and the majority of what I'm seeing come out from citizenship, who, like us, are not experts in this field, but they believe that the interpretation is wrong, and that just because you're on U.S. soil does not mean that you have the protection of the U.S. Constitution. They believe it's only for citizens. Like you and I believed initially before we did our research, and it's still a very popular belief out there. But as we get into the 14th Amendment and what changes are actually being proposed, the changes being proposed are that of many other countries, and the interpretation being that just being born on U.S. soil does not give you birthright citizenship. They're talking about three categories, and two of them I recall right offhand. One being that one parent is of U.S. lineage or is a citizen, and the second being ancestry. Now, as I tried researching into ancestry, it was a little vague. I don't know when they talk about ancestry, they're talking about going back and looking, at was there any U.S. citizenship involved. The third category were those that people here on diplomatic status, their children are born here, they are not citizens because they're not under U.S. jurisdiction. They're here on diplomatic status. So that's the same as, if you've got Americans that are serving abroad as diplomats, they're still under U.S. jurisdiction. And if a child is born in another country, they still have U.S. citizenship, obviously because they're at least one parent is a U.S. citizen, but they're still under U.S. jurisdiction. So the interpretation comes down to, what does U.S. jurisdiction mean? Does that mean just being on the soil? Or does it mean that you've got some tie and you're actually under the jurisdiction of the United States? This is where the interpretation, I think, this is going to be the battleground on it, I believe. But further into the 14th Amendment and the concerns that I've heard from some family members that I consider pretty intelligent, they're talking about, one of them actually is here under the, man, I'm brain farting the term. He was born on U.S. soil to Mexican parents. He and his brothers and sisters have been here. They're productive citizens. His brother and he both worked at the jail. His brother was actually a member of the ICE team here, and but he had passed away. But he's saying, well, if they pass this 14th Amendment and get rid of birthright citizenship, am I going to be deported? Well, as I started looking through, because he wouldn't meet the criteria. He wouldn't meet the criteria being one of the three. But as I looked through it and you get to the end of it, again, reading the whole thing, instead of just getting hung up on what they're looking at the end of it, it states this would only affect those born after February 19th of 2025. So those that are already here are grandfathered in. Anybody born here after February 19th of 2025, when this legislation was proposed, would then not be allowed to be issued. Social security numbers would not be allowed, to be issued the things that they did. But they're not going to go back and start looking at everybody and saying, oh, wait a minute. Okay, now you committed a crime and we found out that you're here and you violated it. No, they're not going retroactive on it. And then they brought up what about the Indians? Who belongs here the more? Well, there's also a clause in this about the Indians. They have a natural citizenship. They can't be touched. They're under federal contract. And where do you deport them to anyway? I think it's another fear tactic to lump somebody
Yeah.
else in with it to get them on your side. But the reality is, they're looking at making the 14th Amendment, just amending it, modifying it to overcome people entering our country illegally to have children and then claim my child's a U.S. citizen, so I need to stay here with my child and use that as a right to citizenship. And I agree. I agree with the amendment. I said it right up front that the 14th Amendment needs to be changed. It's outdated. It needed to be amended, and I'm happy to see that they're actually looking at doing it, and they're not trying to say, let's deport everybody that ever fell into this category. They're saying, let's change it from this point forward. Let's get our immigration status back to where people have to do it legally or automatically be deported. I have
Yeah,
to stand by that.
yeah, with clear, precise, verbatim as to what actually is, like the term jurisdiction that he talked about. What exactly does that mean?
Right.
So clarification of the document needs to be put out also, so it's understood.
And that's the other confusing part, because the Supreme Court, as I researched it, there are 3 or 4 cases that have kind of addressed the issue, and they all have different opinions.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they have different opinions on due process, how much due process, what's the time of due process. One says, oh, if they're over 100 yards inside the country, well, okay, these are also vague. Let's just make this clear cut and avoid the debate.
Yeah, why would you have something like that? 100 yards, you're either in or you're out. That's the dividing line.
Right.
I don't understand some of the rhetoric that goes along with interpretation of the law.
Well, if it's just being on U.S. soil, again, I've used the example in the past. That means if you're not home, I break into your house, sit on your couch, go get some food out of your fridge, turn on the TV. Hey, look, I'm on your soil. I'm under the jurisdiction of your house. You can't throw me out. No.
I just ask you. I'd ask you for the keys to your house so I could go do the same thing.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, okay, is it once I get through the front door, you have to stop fighting me? Is that, that's never been the law.
There's been things like that happen with vacant homes and things,
Right.
And they couldn't, some states, they couldn't oust people that were in the home or evict them. Had to jump through major hoops to get them out of the house,
Right.
So where's the clarification on any of that,
Yeah.
So I agree with having laws, and I agree with having law and order, but there has to be a clear-cut, precise law, and then there has to be enforcement of that law. You can't just say, oh, then you set precedents, well, they let him go, so
Right.
so I can get away with it.
Right. Yeah, it becomes a discrimination issue, which I think the factions that want to muddy these waters, that's what they're using, is discrimination here. And a lot of these protests are about, oh, you're discriminating, but a lot of them are misinformed. A lot of them are thinking that this is a mass raid to get rid of any and everybody in this country that's of particular heritage. I saw something, and I'd like to do the research on it, uh, where Trump claimed. Now, again, I don't know where this came from. Somebody said he claimed that Muslims, by virtue of the fact of their religion, are domestic terrorists and should all be deported. Now,
Wow, that sounds a bit fetched to me, but I don't know.
yeah, again, it
I
was
don't
just
know.
something, and I saw enough people throwing it out that I went, okay, where's it coming from? I didn't have time to research
I,
that, but to me, that's a little crazy. A
and
religion,
yeah,
no. You,
uh,
it would take a little more than that for me to say, okay, they're domestic terrorists.
yeah, not I believe there are some that are, but I also believe that there are good people inside that religion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which one is it? And it's same thing. You have to divide uh, who is the criminal and who is not the criminal. You know,
Exactly.
so,
And who is a citizen and who is not. And
and
citizens,
you can look at the LDS religion here in Utah, and you have criminals inside LDS religion along with the good law-abiding citizens.
mm-hmm,
You know, it's the same thing.
right.
And then I also thought, why not put a lily on a Mexican flag and take it up to the state capitol and see if we can fly it?
The thought had
I'm
also
just kidding.
crossed my mind is, and when it comes to that point, for that matter, Bones, where does it stop? And I think on that issue,
Yeah,
that's where I went is where does that stop? And I think
yeah.
that's what the rest of Congress is saying is where does it stop? Come on. And
Yeah, I didn't want to change the subject, but it's just like with all the stuff that's going on and what the governors and stuff are letting the people get away with.
mm-hmm.
Why not? I mean, let's
Yeah.
get away. If we're gonna get away with it, let's just get away with it.
Well, especially if we're going
Uh,
under the guise of we want to make these communities feel welcome. We want them to know that we welcome them here in our country. Well, there's a lot of
the U,
factions that you could
well, the
you could put
U.S.
under that
has,
category.
the U.S. has and always will welcome um, legal processed immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Uh, that's what the United States of America was founded on, and that's the way it would probably remain in my book for its eternity.
It will
Um,
until yeah. It will. That's my opinion. The American flag covers it all. It is a welcoming flag. We've got the Statue of Liberty there saying we welcome legal immigrants that want to come and be part of our country and be productive citizens. Yes, we welcome you.
and they have programs to help them get there. If you come through um, legally and you go through the programs and through the steps and become a citizen, or even get your green card or whatever you want to call it, so you can work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, go for it. You know, go
Exactly.
for it. Go for it.
Exactly.
I dealt with some of that, having been employed by a Canadian company and working in the U.S. And then
Mm-hmm.
if I had to cross the border to Canada, Canada frowned big on letting anybody from the United States inside Canada at that time do any work.
Ah.
You know, so I was told when I got to the border, dress like a tourist and tell them you're there on holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, what if I get caught? My problem is, what if I get caught not on holiday? What's the consequences? And are you going to support me in the fact that you know
Right.
I might have wound up in Canadian prison? I don't know.
Right, but your concern was how do I do this legally? How do I mean I'm not doing it to be a criminal. I'm up here to actually do some productive work. So
Yeah, but I can understand, that side of it. Uh,
So, the whole thing comes down again, it's the 14th Amendment interpretations. It's the interpretation of the Constitution and due process, and what does being under US jurisdiction actually mean, and what are the proposed changes and who does it affect? And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And, quite honestly, Bones, it only took me about 2 hours of research and reading into this and finding the right documents to get to the truth and blow a lot of this fear out of the water. Uh,
right, right.
the issue on the forefront being the riots in LA and threatened riots across the country. There's supposed to be big riots that are scheduled for the 16th that are supposed to be taking place nationwide protesting this deportation issue. Uh, we know that President Trump has called for the National Guard at this point to go in and support Los Angeles and to put an end to the violence. The deployment of Marines has not happened yet. There are Marines that are deployed in that area. I mean, you got Camp Pendleton in San Diego, not far from there, well, right outside of Oceanside, that if they were to deploy Marines on top of the National Guard, I mean, I would imagine you could put an end to it pretty quick, but it'd be a pretty violent end. Um,
Yeah, I don't believe that that's the desire. I don't believe that that's the desire behind the deployment of the National Guard.
no.
And and if the Marines did have to be deployed due to the excess violence, and the Guard couldn't handle it. Um, I'm looking at it as it's pretty much a declaration of war.
Oh,
You know,
exactly. I
uh,
believe that's what it's called. When you've got people on U.S. soil waving flags from another country, destroying property, terrorizing citizens, that's a declaration of war. That's not people protesting, and it
you
is
know,
a
they're
declaration of war. And if they want to fight on our
they're
soil, that would be a mistake.
they're asked I forget who it was, but some diplomats from Mexico was asked that question: what if we come down there, waving our American flag and destroying property and blah blah blah? What would happen?
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, you'd be arrested or shot. You know,
Exactly.
um, so it's not tolerated in other countries. So why would we tolerate that kind of behavior in our country?
And I
You know?
agree. Uh, California, of course, they've tried to fight him, saying that he couldn't do it. Supreme Court's upheld the president, saying yes, he has every right to do that. I see where the governor down in Texas has already got his National Guard deploying preemptively to stop or quell anything that may start up in their major cities due to these called protests on the 16th. And he's being applauded nationwide. That's how a governor should act. The federal government should
Exactly.
not have to get involved in this.
Yeah.
You are the governor of that state. You take control of it. You handle it. If you need assistance,
Yeah.
we're
That's
happy to help.
that's what should have happened in this case, but we don't have that kind of governor in California. It's kind of sad. Um,
Well, and I see where even the Democratic Party on a lot of these issues now are jumping ship and coming on board with what's being proposed and with what's happening in our government. They're saying, "Look, enough's enough. We're looking like fools. Let's get on board for what's right for our country."
that's where it should be wholeheartedly from the beginning. If I'm going to be a representative of any part of the United States, whether it's a state representative, that's how it should be. You know,
Oh, I
be in
agree.
support, be in support of the United States of America and its people.
I agree wholeheartedly. They should all, once everybody is elected, now let's figure out how we can work together. Let's figure out how we can make this country the best it can be. I think some of these issues are leading to that. Um, I've seen, and we have talked about some of this maybe being scripted in the plan and what was going to happen. Uh, I don't, I don't know if that's wholeheartedly true, but I do believe that things were prepared for in case. This administration does not seem to have any hesitation to take action when something erupts. They're
Well, law,
prepared.
law, yeah, law and order is a big thing with this administration.
Mm-hmm.
Want to uphold the law and keep things in order. And that, to me, that's how it should be. You know,
Mm-hmm.
even when I lived in the criminal element for a while, I realized that what I was doing, I may have to pay some consequences if I get caught.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's the risk that you take if you live on that side.
Right.
Like, you know, it's like some of these you see, you know, the officer shootings and things like that. They don't tell the whole story. You know, but if you brandish a weapon in front of a bunch of police officers making threats to shoot, what's going to happen?
Well, that's a FAFO, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know,
Play
you may
stupid
or may not.
games, win stupid prizes.
Yeah.
Common
One other thing
sense.
and I don't know for sure where this is at, but in the beginning of it, there was talk about how they were walking up to the police officers and stuff in Los Angeles and spitting on them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then it was mandated, you know, if you spit, we hit. So
Well,
if they,
I can tell you right now, when the way that the legality of it stood, and this is years ago when I was involved with law enforcement, spitting was considered an assault, and this was, you know, during the AIDS epidemic scare. Uh, if somebody was tested and had AIDS, it became an aggravated assault or an attempted murder. But spitting on anybody was an assault. So if you spit on a police officer, it was an assault on a police officer. So then you have to go back to the scale of force that law enforcement is allowed to use. And basically what it comes down to is they're allowed to up by one. So if you're using verbal noncompliance, they can go hands on. If you're using physical noncompliance, they can go to impact weapons. If you're using a weapon, they can go to deadly force. So they're allowed to up it
yeah,
by one. So if you talk about you spit, we hit, I don't like the terminology because it really does sound aggressive. But the reality is, if you spit, you're committing a physical assault. If you're committing a physical assault, the correct response for that is I'm allowed to use an impact weapon.
you know, and then an arrest
You know,
would
a
be made.
baton. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I would I would think an arrest is made, you know, and so then you're, you know, whatever physical force it takes to put cuffs on you and arrest you, you know, after an assault, that's what
right.
happened.
And they want to use the definition was minimal force necessary to obtain compliance. So just because
But
somebody
that's
spits on you doesn't mean you can hit them. If I'm a 6'3", 240-pound police officer carrying a gun, a baton, a taser, I've got all this training, and a 70-pound female comes up and spits on me, do I have the right to blast her in the chops with my baton? No.
I don't think so, you
Minimum
know, but
force necessary to obtain compliance. You know what? If I'm that 6'4" guy, yeah, it's going to piss me off if she spits on me. But how hard would it be for me to grab a hold of her by the arm, handcuff her, and put a net over her head so that she can't spit anymore, that doesn't interfere with her breathing, and take her to jail? I don't have to hurt her. Now let's reverse the
Yeah.
roles. I'm a 117-pound female police officer, and a 6'4", 240-pound guy comes up and starts spitting on me.
Needs
Now,
an equalizer.
exactly, she's going to be allowed to use a little more force because it's going to take a little more from her to effectively control the situation. So
Yeah,
common
that would.
sense and case by case is always going to prevail. That's why I hate the blanket statements of, you spit, we hit. Uh, Not in every case, brother. Not in every case. I'm sorry.
Well, it just came out, the video that I saw, uh, that's something that President Trump said.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I understood it, as kind of how you put it. It depends on the circumstance and what does hit actually mean. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, might say, well, that's a crime you committed, so you're under arrest.
Mm-hmm.
What happens from what happens from there depends on the individual that's under arrest.
Yeah, it goes under the escalation of force. They spit. Okay, turn around and put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest. Now they're going to resist or get physical. Okay, now you've got to upgrade it. But you do start out
And
with that escalation.
in my younger days, I found out what six police officers can do.
So yeah, you talk about the phrases and you talk about those, and I think this is where, especially President Trump gets himself into trouble, man. He says it with right off the cuff. He says it
Well,
right
then
off the cuff,
then
and
what?
what he means by that is not literal.
Right? And, what was the rest of the conversation? Because that's the segment that was taken out of
Mm-hmm.
whatever else was said.
Right.
So I don't know, but I just wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought. Kind of what I thought. So after my involvement, with the officers and being hit in the head with one of them flashlights.
Oh,
Um,
my dad used to call it
and,
his large, black, unusual looking flashlight.
and, handcuffed and shackled at the ankles and, thrown in the back of the police car. I learned a lesson, you
Yeah.
know.
And again,
I
it
learned a
comes
big
down
lesson.
to if we enforce and the punishment fits the crime and we do it consistently, pretty soon you get compliance.
Right,
If you're
right.
selective in your punishment, and there's a chance, even a 50% chance that I'm going to get away with something, uh, that's why Vegas is rich, man, because people always like to play the odds. I've always said
Right.
if I were to speed to work every day on the same road and it has a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit and I'm doing 90, and I do it every day for 6 months and never get stopped, and then I get stopped once, hey, I'll accept that ticket, but it's not going to stop me from going 90 to work. But if every time my speedometer hit 46 miles an hour, those red lights came on behind me, I'm not going to attempt that
You'd be,
anymore.
yeah, you'd be more in compliance with the law.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I wanted to see what you would have to say. But I know that what he said was taken out of context. Um, as far as the general public concerned, because they wanted to present it in a negative way.
Well, he wanted to make a
Um,
point.
yeah, and the public and the news media wanted it presented in a negative way towards the administration.
Right.
You know,
Right. They
um,
utilize anything they can.
just like when he said, if we could drink Clorox, right?
Hmm.
It was just a let's get something inside the body that would fight the bug. That's
Right.
all it was.
Right.
It's not telling you to go out and drink Clorox.
Right. Yeah, they're going to take things out of context, and again, that's not just one side doing. Both sides will take things out of context and throw it at the other and use it for these battles. Uh,
It will.
it's human nature. It's the way of life. It's always been, and at some point, we've got to wise up and rise up as American citizens, join together and realize the reality of what's happening and figure out together what we can do to stop it.
Yeah, and what I've seen lately in LA is it's calming down quite a bit. There are still people running around thinking they can get away with whatever they get away with, but it's getting fewer and further between.
Hmm.
So I would predict that LA will be under control sometime this week.
And I don't know if we'll lose too many more cities because I think that the rest of the country's going, we've had enough. We've had enough. And
Well, then if they're advertising the protest and the preliminary setup, like what city you said that they'd already
yeah,
planned on
down in Texas,
deploying the guard to take care of business, handle protection of property and things like that. Um, if they know ahead of time that it's coming and they take the steps they need to take to protect the people in the town, then
hmm,
a lot less is going to happen. Hopefully, they'll have a peaceful demonstration, and maybe, just maybe, we might get some real insight on why all of this is really happening.
hmm. Well, I agree with you, Bones. I agree 100%. So
Hey,
I think we've covered everything we set out to cover. I we've definitely addressed, the Kilmar Abrego Garcia thing. He is in federal custody. He is facing two federal indictments, all on trafficking. Of course, you've got the other side of that saying he was a construction worker and he was transporting workers to job sites. Uh, Federal government's saying in the indictments they've got proof that he transported more than 50 people a month, trafficking them from Texas up in further into the United States. They have evidence that he had their cell phones in his possession while transporting, so they couldn't contact anybody. So we'll see how that plays out. Uh, the side backing him, again, stating that he's an innocent construction worker, he has no criminal record. Uh, we'll see how this actually plays out. As far as the deportations go, um, they're trying to handle everything legally. They're doing the best they can to reverse the issue that happened with the loss of control in the last administration. Um, we've said it before, and I'll say it again. If you're here illegally, enough said.
right,
We've got the right to track you down, detain you. If you're
right.
committing crimes and you're here illegally, deportation it should be automatic. There is some
Yeah,
due
there's just
process. It's not to the level under the Constitution that a U.S. citizen has. And on the 14th Amendment, they're not talking about abolishing birthright citizenship. They're talking about modifying the definition and make it clear cut, make it make sense. They're not making it retroactive and going after those who are already here. It would only apply to those born after the legislation was proposed in February 2025. So I hope that today's conversations gave you a little bit of insight, a little bit of factual information on what is actually taking place. If you've got a differing opinion, by all means, contact us. We'd love to hear it. I know my mind is changed on issues by legitimate information and facts. It's been proven right in the middle of some of our conversations. So, from
Yeah,
Padre Havoc, that's my opinion. Bones?
yep. And I would like to encourage people to get involved and do research. And by all means, if you've got some information that's different than what we're putting out, we definitely would like to hear it. Um, the factual stuff. Um, and also, if you have links to things that we have talked about that would provide more information, we'd like to see that also. Um, pretty much all I've got to say.
All right.
And
Well, another great conversation with Bones today. So from Bones and
yeah,
Padre Havoc, man, that's we'll see what our next subject turns out to be. Y'all have a great day, and
stay positive, everybody.